Hello and welcome to this overview of the different layouts available to you in Bionic Studio from Broadcast Bionics. This is something that we'll help you with when we're doing a setup with you on site, but it's always useful to know the different options that are available because different layouts are designed to help different people to do their job. Now, if you're not sure which layout to pick, the best option is to go for this one. It's called 3-column view and it will suit most people very well. You can get access to the phone lines, you can sort out which order you want to use the calls in, or have a look at your favourite social media messages here, or sometimes you can send messages to the presenter if you're using it in tandem with a different view. You've got access to all of your social media content if you have the Bionic social module. You can look at previous calls that have come in. You've got your devices down the bottom. If you're using a handset, then your handset will be available, and you also have the chat. So everything you need is on one screen, and you can use this if you're producing, if you're a call handler, or if you're a presenter, and you can even use it if you're a presenter doing your own stuff on your own in a studio. It's a very flexible layout. So if you're not sure, then a default option is just to go for 3-column view. Another thing we'll be talking about when we set up the layouts is what you want your default views to be. So at any time you can go onto the view menu by pressing and long holding, because anything that's got a little blob like this on, if you press and long hold will bring up another menu. You'll see that you can choose any layout you like. Anyone can swap to any layout at any time. So the default is just about what happens when you open up your machine, which layout you're going to see on that particular machine when you log in, and also what happens when you lightly press the view menu to go into the default B layout. So on my machine, I have got the docked view as my default B because it allows me to get on with other work and still see that phone calls are coming in. But you might need to have a different layout on your B view depending on what's going on your computer. Perhaps you've got a dedicated phone box machine and you don't really mind about having a second layout set up as a default, or maybe you're in a studio and some presenters need to see it like this and some presenters need to see a different presenter layout. So it's just there to save you a few clicks. But remember, at any time, if you press and long hold, you can simply change the view on your machine manually. So this is the 3-column view. So if in doubt, pick 3-column as your default A view and docked as your default B view, and that will be a very good starting point. But sometimes there are other layouts that just are more useful for particular jobs. So let's have a look at some of those. This is the self-op view, and it might be useful if you're mainly on a phone-in show and you don't particularly have much to do with social media, or you're just looking at social media in short bursts. Alternatively, it's a good view if you're on a small screen for some reason and you don't have enough space for all of your phone lines, with that on-air column being in the middle like it is in the 3-column view. You've still got access to the on-air queue if you want to use it. It's on this tab. It's just slightly harder sometimes to be able to see everything that's going on at once. So this is a view that's probably better if you mainly do phone calls and if you are potentially using a smaller screen. In fact, if you're using a square screen rather than a rectangular screen, you can have self-op 4x3, which is exactly the same idea. It's just that you'll see that the devices stretch across the whole bottom of the screen on this view, so it's even better if you're on a smaller screen and you just need as much space as possible. You've still got your on-air queue and your call log all available here. It's just giving more prominence to the phone calls. Now maybe you're switching to a part of the program where you're just looking at social media. So in that case, the social view is a really helpful one. It's got that on-air column that we've talked about in other trainings, and in here it's just got the social messages up nice and big. It doesn't have any devices down the bottom, so this is useful if you've got someone who's doing a social media producer job, maybe somewhere out in the office. Perhaps you've got someone who's in the studio who is looking at social media and controlling virtual director, but they're not answering phone calls. In this case, this would be a good layout. Or maybe you're just going to a part of the show where you're going to be concentrating on social media and you don't want the distraction of the phone line, so you can flip into this view to have the social messages up nice and big. So this is really suited to someone who's looking purely at social media, or for being in part of the program where you're looking for social media and you don't need any distraction with phone calls because you can't answer them on this view and you can't connect them through to the sound desk. So this is the social view. Now, coming back to phone calls, this is the call screener view. This view title can sometimes confuse people because they think it's designed for a producer who's in a studio and calling people back. It isn't. It's actually designed for people whose job it is purely to answer the calls and take in as much information as possible. So maybe you're on one of those programs where you get hundreds of people calling you at once, and you have a team of people in one part of the building who are just answering the calls and getting as much data in as possible. And then a producer later down the line is choosing from that list who to call back. So you'll notice in the call screener view that there's no access to the hybrids or the devices. It's purely there so that you can answer calls. Now you might wonder, well, how do I fill in the call information? Because when you first log in on this view, this centre column here will be blank. But if I answer a call, you'll see now that all of the call details have come up nice and big. So it's really quick for the call screener because they just simply have to start from the top, fill in the name, where they're calling from, the phone number, the call point, give them a rating, tag them, all of those things, and they can very quickly fill in the call details and then decide whether or not that should be someone that might be used later by marking them as flagged, or whether they're nothing to do with the program, in which case they hang them up and mark them as reject. So that's the call screener view. It's designed for a busy show where you just have people answering calls and then someone else later on is going to be choosing who to call them back. And then we have a kind of compromise layout where we have the 3-column view, but instead of having the on-air queue, we have those big call details up in the middle. So maybe you're answering a lot of calls and it's just you on your own, or for whatever reason you're not using the on-air layout. This way, when you answer a call, you can have the call details up nice and big in the middle, and you're still able to route callers through to the studio directly as well if you need to. So the downside of this is that you're not going to have access to that on-air queue, and the on-air queue is really helpful in a lot of situations. But if you are having to answer calls very quickly, take in a lot of information, and you still need to route people through to the studio itself, then the 3-column call details view might be the one that you need. So now we'll have a look at some of the views that presenters might need if they're not using the 3-column view. Presenter views are there to make your presenter's life easier, especially in a situation where you've got a production team who are choosing the calls for you. So a really useful one is presenter on air, and this just has the middle column, so the on-air column from that 3-column view, but up nice and big for the presenter, so they can see exactly what's going on. And as you'll see in a separate training, in this view, when I finish with the call as a presenter, if I want to, I can hit the remove button, and then they've come out of the on-air queue, but I haven't affected whether or not they're still connected to the sound desk. So it's a way of giving your presenter a running order of calls to work from, and then being able to see very clearly what's going on and still have all the information they need up nice and big. Now, don't confuse presenter on air view with Presenter on Air Simple. Presenter on Air Simple looks quite similar, but you'll notice it doesn't have those remove buttons down the side because it works in a different way. The idea of this is if you're working at a station where your producer doesn't have access to the devices and instead the presenter is the person who chooses which device to route each caller through to. Perhaps there's been a technical limitation at your station or a historical division of work that says that the producer isn't the one to route the callers through, it's actually the presenter. So in this case, if you tap onto the line, you'd normally see that they'd be put into that on-air queue for you as the presenter on hold. And then if I tap onto the call I want, I can then route them through to the sound desk myself. And then if I want to put the next person into that hybrid 2, device 2, I can then, with one click, connect them through to the sound desk myself. So Presenter on Air Simple is designed for presenters that want that running order view but want to, with one tap, decide to put someone into and out of a device on air. And the main Presenter on Air view is designed for producers and presenters who are working together in a slightly different way. So they've got two similar names, but they actually work in a different way fundamentally underneath. Now, perhaps you might be a presenter and the running order idea really doesn't work for you on your show. Perhaps it's just a big discussion program and you just have 2 or 3 people connected through on air all the time and the order that you need to talk to them in isn't that important. In which case you might find that a view that looks at the devices might be more useful to you than a view that looks at the on-air queue. So for example, we've got devices only horizontal. And this shows you the devices that are available with the people connected through to them in this order. And it's called horizontal because you're reading across horizontally. So you've got the chat screen down the bottom and you've just got up nice and big who is in which device. So it's not telling you which order to take them in, it's just literally having the information there in front of you so that you can decide who you're going to go to next. Similarly, devices only vertical does exactly the same thing but the other way around, so we can read the calls from top to bottom. Again, this one might be useful if you've got a slightly smaller screen in your studio and you just want to give the presenter the very basic information that there is someone somewhere in that device, or maybe you've got a studio manager who just wants to be able to see who's connected to which source on the desk so that they can then operate the sound desk or the mixer. So this is a basic view that isn't giving the presenter very much information apart from there's someone connected through to this particular device. So we're now coming on to the docked views. These are often set as the secondary views, but they can be really useful for presenter screens in some circumstances, or again if you've got a sound operator who's running the desk and they just want to know what's on each available source. This one gives you the option to see the call log and also who's connected through to each device. So that might be useful. Perhaps you could put a little filter on here if you're the presenter, so you can just see the people who have been on air. And then that can be useful during a show, because if you know that someone's just been on air, you might be able to say, oh, earlier on we talked to Annie and now Pete's going to make a very similar point, because all the calls that you'd actually spoken to already would be into this list. So that's one option. You can also choose to dock the devices at the bottom of the screen, so that can be useful if you're looking at a news-based running order and again you're just looking at what's been connected through to the studio for you. So perhaps you're the sound desk operator, you've got your big running order up on your screen for the rest of the content in the program, perhaps it's a news show, and then you've got what's been connected through on the desk down here. Now at the moment you're just going to have the person's name and where they're calling from, and not necessarily their call point, so that's something to think about if that's important for you to know. You can also do the same thing, but with the information at the top of the screen, if that's something that you prefer to have instead as your layout. And then we have the docked view. Now this view will also give you the phone calls that as they are coming in to the program, as well as what's routed through onto each device. So that can be a useful one if you're the call answerer or you're the producer and you just want to look at something else on your machine, look at the internet, and then you're seeing, oh hang on, I've got a phone call, I might need to answer that call now. Another option for your presenter is presenter devices. This one's got the devices down the side. You can still use the handset if you've got one connected, you've still got access to the chat, and in this one, instead of having the on-air queue in the middle, you've got the on-air queue on the side, and whatever is in the on-air queue is coming up nice and big here. Anything you're clicking onto is going to come up nice and big in that reading pane for you. So it's just another way of having the screen laid out. You can actually navigate through that on-air list even if it's not highlighted on the screen by pressing the next buttons so that you can see what's in there and navigate through that list even if you haven't got it highlighted on your screen. Presenter lines lets the presenter see any call that has been put through to the studio for them with this screened information already selected. So instead of having to manually go onto the lines menu and click the screened calls only button, this way it's done for you automatically. So you can only access the control of the callers that have been marked as screened and therefore ready for you to go on air. And you can see more about this in the screened calls workflow video that I've done separately. So this is just a shortcut to save you from having to remember to press a button when you log into the studio. And finally, we have codec only view. Codec only view is one not to press unless you've got codec control configured at your station and you understand why. For some reason, this one's still available on the general screen because some of our customers have got that and they need access to it. Most of the time you don't. And as you'll see, the flaw with codec only view is that once you're into it, there's no way of getting out of it without force quitting the program. So really, I advise that you don't try and use codec only view unless you've been told that it's a viable option at your station, because otherwise you're going to have to close Phonebox and come back into it again. And as you'll see, because on my machine I've got my default set as 3-column view, whenever I've closed the machine it comes back in and it's defaulted back into that 3-column view that we all know and love so well, and that's just saved me having to do lots of clicks whenever I get into my program. So it's all set up ready for me to go, just how I like it. So I hope that's helpful. As always, if you've got any questions, just let us know. We're very happy to work with you because depending on your workflow, the combination of layouts you choose for your presenters and your production team and how they work together can make your life a lot easier and a lot quicker. And that's something that we really specialise in and like helping stations to get absolutely right. So if you've got any questions, please don't hesitate to get in touch. And in the meantime, I hope that was useful. Thanks for watching.